Are ready.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Um, this is pretty casual. I'm one among you. I'm one of your peers, and I'm just trying to share my experience in order to give you ideas, inspirations, thoughts, more of a brainstorming session. So feel free to ask me questions. I will try to wrap it up pretty quickly so that I will allow you to come up with more specific questions on details that you are interested in. And then let me start with sharing my screen. Um, all right, so one tip for you that the default setting that the Zoom has focuses mainly on the presentation, which I don't think is the best idea. A lot of time, it's good to see the presenter. If you're like me, you want to see how the presenter is speaking and what they're saying, so you can use the mouse to arrow pointer to drag the line between the presenter screen and the video and drag it so you can enlarge the presenter's video. I do it often, and that helps me be more connected with the presenter on what they're trying to say. Very good. So I am Danish Bahati. I'm a movement disorders neurologist at University of Nebraska Medical Center, and I teach physicians online using various methods in the developing world, in the places where they are more serving the most underserved, while they're at their work, doing their jobs, and sometimes doing two jobs in an active way, engaging way, uh, using these active learning platforms or methods to teach them using their own patients, their own clinical cases, in a way that they can make a transformation or a change. My hope, my aim is to reach millions of patients to provide patient care, not by catching fish for their physicians, but teaching their physicians on how to fish. And I hope to share some of my experiences. I use various methods of teaching, including YouTube videos, including live webinars that I help organize, and of course, short and long courses in Canvas, which is the main reason we're here. So um, let's take a case example. So I'm from Pakistan, and take an example of Pakistan as a case study. It's a world's fifth largest population. It has an estimated 212 million population in 2018, and has about a little over 200 trained neurologists. That means it's one neurologist per million population. To help you understand that, the state of Nebraska has 2 million population. So with that ratio, there will be two neurologists for the whole state of Nebraska. And we know that's not true, luckily. So you could see that there is a resource constraint. And interestingly, if you look at the countries around Pakistan in this region called Middle East, there are more than 50% of the neurologists in Middle East are from Pakistan or Pakistani descent. So there's significant brain drain. And if you look at physicians in the United States, there are 20,000 physicians of Pakistani descent and an estimate of about 400 to 500 neurologists in the United States of Pakistani descent. So there is, I actually know more than 200 of them through this group that we have formed of neurologists of Pakistani descent in North America, to give you an idea of how resource constraint we are in Pakistan. But that's an example, right? So the question that comes to my mind is that why can't we train more neurologists from Pakistan? So I started going to Pakistan regularly in 2014. So I met the president of Pakistan Society of Neurologists, and I said, what can we do to improve the training of physicians in Pakistan or neurologists in Pakistan? And he said, well, why don't you take a neurologist with you and train them at University of Nebraska Medical Center? And I said, even if I do that, and even if I take one neurologist every year, to University of Nebraska Medical Center to train them in movement disorders, which is my specialty. In 10 years, we'll still have 10 trained neurologists. So that's the challenge, right? So people who want to train, who don't have local training programs, they cannot go to other places because of travel restrictions, visa restrictions, restrictions of training spots. And it's just not scalable. I cannot start a program at University of Nebraska Medical Center and say, okay, I will take one neurologist first year and then I will double it every year. So 2 and then 4 and then 8 and then 16. It's just not possible to scale such kind of activity or engagement. But I did take a neurologist from Pakistan, Dr. Nabil Sayed here, did a 2 years of movement disorder fellowship training with us at University of Nebraska with my team. And just 2 weeks ago, he moved back to Pakistan to be the first fellowship trained movement disorder neurologist in the whole country of 212 million and start the first movement disorder center. So what I started doing was that I started going to Pakistan in 2014 every 4 months, about 3 times a year, and give lectures and give workshops and trainings with a hope to make a change in movement disorder part of the neurology, and do my small contribution. And this is the first year, 2020, since 2014, that I have not been able to go to Pakistan more than once. So I have been there once, early March, for some teaching and training. But I immediately realized in a couple of years that I'm not sure what impact it's making. What am I teaching? What are they learning? What changes are occurring? Is patients getting better care? What's happening? So I came up with a crazy idea. I made a proposal. Why not we teach physicians online where they are in their own setting and in their own resource constrained environment. And the goal would be to use their own cases, give them some activities or assignments to complete, teach them in their own comfort zone, and anchor that learning to their own environment so that they cannot come to Nebraska Medicine, learn everything, and then go back to places where they do not even have a desk or a proper chair, and expect them to do what they were doing here over there and do it in an affordable manner. They don't have to pay travel costs, they don't have to pay lodgings, they don't have to pay large amount of fees or things like that while they're doing their jobs and earning their salary. So this proposal was prepared in 2017 with collaboration between Pakistan Society of Neurology and University of Nebraska Medical Center. But then I said, why just stay small? Why just Pakistan? Why not Bangladesh? Why not India? Why not Burma, Bhutan? Why not Kuwait or Qatar or Bahrain or Ethiopia, Sudan? Why can't we not expand this, get learners, these physicians from multiple countries, multiple cultures, who have never met before and may never meet during the course, or maybe never unless they are in a conference together? How can we bring them together to learn? And the question will be that, can we teach them can we make them self-guided learners so that they are self-motivated, they're self-managing, self-monitoring, and they're modifying themselves in an ongoing basis, not this one course that they're going to do for movement disorders. And can we form a community of learning? Can they start doing sharing knowledge, sharing practices, a collective intelligence, teaching each other, helping support, holding each other accountable and responsible in a form of a true community of learning from all these various backgrounds? And can we have them go into this sense of competition with each other with awards and scores, measures of success, kind of what we call the gamification of education? So here's an example from my current course where I'm sharing the winner, the runners up, the top performers, and the comments there are people who are saying that, we're amazed that they're doing so good. We want to do more. And then the runner up of this module 2 reaches out to me and says, oh, so I'm second. What can I do to be the first? And what are my areas of weaknesses? And to me, that's the true sense of gamification. I think sometimes we get distracted and we start thinking that gamification of education is creating, these online video games or something that you need to interact. But what game is, or what a game is, a challenge where you have to learn something to get better at it, and it's challenging enough that it keeps you interested, but it's not so hard that you completely fall through. So, I learned many of these interesting concepts by listening to these podcasts. So I'll share a couple of examples. This top one is an episode, The Worst Video Game Ever, from the NPR podcast called Planet Money. And they talked about how a video game was made, which had confusing rules and was too challenging, and it completely failed, although it was very anticipated game of the year at the peak of the gaming era. And then this podcast on Apple called Immerse talks about these cardboard games, which are not even video games, on how the rules are set, how cards are made, designed, exchanged, how challenges are set, how hidden secret cards are given. And we talked about this Easter egg this morning in one of the session, which kind of fits with this idea of gamification of education. And then they need feedback. They need to know what they're doing right, what they're not doing right, so that they can become self-directed learner. So they need this mentoring and coaching, and not only about the movement disorder neurology itself, but also about how to then pass on this knowledge and education and become the ambassadors of movement disorders, because many of them are faculty in their own institutions, young neurologists, and they are teaching the residents and trainees and their peers. How can then they start teaching it to the others around them? So with this idea, the way we decided we're going to do it was to create this course called Mini Fellowship in Movement Disorders, an online course on Canvas, where we will have 12 modules, each module 2 week long. So taking the whole course, taking about 6 months, starting with some introduction, some pre-testing, getting where they're at, walking them through this process of modules with video lectures and assignments and tasks and activities to do, and until the completion, covering the whole spectrum or curriculum of the movement disorder. And there was a big focus on creating these assignments or activities for them to do, which engages them and make them self-directed learner and also teachers for their peers. So on the top left here, you can see an assignment of doing an infographic with wonderful creativity by the learner, taking the information gathered during the module through lectures and reading assignments to put together into something that they can share back. And if you look at bottom left here, we can see that creativity reaches to a point where they are coming up with these ideas that they can use in their own clinical practice. So the idea was to create something on movement disorder emergencies. The learner, who's a neurologist in Kuwait, created this infographic that she can use in her hospital, in her hospitals, inpatients, clinics. And not only that, she also then translated into Arabic for her local population to be actually start being implemented within the 2 week of the module. That's how powerful these assignments and engagements are. And there is, of course, cases for them to do, their activities where they draw their concepts of anatomy. And they also call on the superheroes like Superman and Batman and Superwoman to help them with these engaging activities and assignments to complete as a process of learning. They are introduced to this idea of peer grading and group assignments gradually. So in the module 3 or 4, they are introduced to the group assignments, and then they go on in module 5 or 6 to start grading each other so that they have less dependence on us as teacher, a one-to-one communication, but rather they form like a circular communication where they are starting to form dependence on each other as a feedback on what they're doing good, what they're learning, and how what else they can do. And they are supported by this robust discussion platform where they form channels of communication with various topics, and they start forming their own channels to start discussing on topics. And they have these threaded discussion where they can share learning with each other and share resources to form a true community of learning. And this is based on these ideas, for example, these 7 evidence-based principles of student-centered learning. And if I highlight just a couple of them, that the idea is that a goal-directed practice, which is coupled with a targeted feedback, enhances the quality of student learning. So our job is to provide the targeted feedback and a goal for the practice. And similarly, another idea from that is to become self-directed learners, students must learn to monitor and adjust their approaches to learning. And that's the formative feedback for them to go back and self-reflect. And that's through assignments where they are drawing, they're putting things together, they're teaching, they're grading each other to form how to monitor myself and how to monitor each other so that we become self-directed, independent learners by the end of this course. So can it be done? Was it be able to be done? So let me give you a report on what we were able to achieve. This mini fellowship started in 2017 and is continuing this year, 2020, with the fourth batch. So far, up until 2019, we got 73 applicants, neurologists, and we selected 32, and 29 completed the course. So it was a 90% completion rate for this course, where they are doing it in their own environment, never having met each other, with their jobs, in a voluntary fashion. And they were relatively young neurologists, but they were spread all over 10 cities initially in Pakistan, 16 institutions, and they were really engaged. And you can see that despite their busy schedule, how much actively they were participating. 5,000 plus messages, 100 plus cases every year. This gets repeated. There are more than 100 cases shared, and it's not a summary of 3 or 4 years together. It's a summary of one single year, and it gets bigger and busier every year after that. Who are these learners? These are the neurologists for 2017 that we graduated. This is 2018, our second batch, and then this is 2019, our third batch that graduated with these adult learners, physicians who are now leaders in their own areas. And 2020 is going on, and now we have expanded to our initial vision. 13 neurologists from 7 countries, 5 different time zones, who are currently participating. And I'm showing you some of the assignments and feedback that they're getting. They are in their module 4 right now, continuing on to the 12 modules. And it's really exciting. They get some kind of an assessment on, are they learning or not? And there are many ways to do it. I'm not sure if one is any better than other or ideal. This is one where they get a pre-test of 100-point assessment, and after 6 months they do a post-test, and you can see an improvement on every single one of them. Every year we see about 30 to 35% improvement in their assessment. Some of it is skill assessment based on video questions. Some is knowledge assessment based on multiple choice that they get as a score. And they also do self-reflection, self-analysis on a grading. So there's a level 1 to 5 grading scale that is used as milestones by Accreditation Council of Graduate Medical Education. And we use that, and we often see that the group average goes from a level 2 on this scale all the way up to level 4, 4.5 as a group in terms of improvement. And they get a certificate of completion as something to tell them that, build them confidence, give them an idea that they have completed and achieved something. But of course, this is just a reminder of all the efforts they have put in completing this course and assignment. So challenges, this is of course not easy. There is many roadblocks, many issues you face, but let me just highlight 2 of them to show that, there are challenges, but they can be overcome. So the first challenge is that as I was starting to design this in 2016, and I was going to different people to get feedback, I go to one of my mentor who works with the American Academy of Neurology and pitch this idea to him. And he says, well, there are courses everywhere. American Academy of Neurology has so many courses. There are webinars, everybody's teaching. And in this day and age of COVID-19 pandemic, you can see that there are webinars. I get emails of 20 webinars every week, courses that I could attend to, lectures that I can watch. So what's the point? Why starting this one new thing? And I think the difference is that I hope I was able to convey that watching webinars or lectures is not a full comprehensive learning. It's a very passive kind of a seminar style of didactic teaching, which has less value than creating an environment, a culture of learning where active learning is going on, where is targeted feedback is being given, where is individualized and customized, and where there is a community of learning that is formed with group assignments and peer grading, which is way different. But it's something that is hard to imagine or put your head around if you think that online learning is just giving lectures or watching a webinar or watching me speak right now. It should not be the end all or be all in itself. The other challenge that I was faced with was the technology challenge. These are underserved areas. These are developing countries. These are adult learners who may not have expertise with many of these things. And literally, there were times when I began where I would say, okay, start the, press any key. And they will say, okay, which one is the any key? And literally, this is not, not a joke, but a true scenario where you are dealing with people who are completely new to these environments, and you give them these tools to get onto, and then you have to walk them through. So one example I'll give you will be videos. When I started doing these sessions, I would have these fancy cameras, and I would record in 4K or 1080p, and I have these lighting and audio, and then I will upload them, and I'll say, okay, take a quiz, and they will come back and say, we couldn't do the quiz because the videos were not loading. I couldn't watch the video, I couldn't watch the lecture. And you have to learn to compress and dumb down and go back to the old cell phone technology and all something that can upload quickly and download quickly. And then you have to teach them on how to do it, on how to compress these videos, and put this together into something that they can share and discuss among themselves. And you have to really walk them through this and hold their hand. There are many other such challenges, but I wanted to highlight these two for this idea of online training through this active learning. And in the end, before I open for discussion and give you more details on a relevant point that interests you, I want to thank my team here. My wonderful team made all this possible. I'm just presenting on their behalf. I want to thank all these super ladies that we have, Dr. Erin Smith, who put together a lot of these collaboration information together, Dr. Hellman and Dr. Sire, who's putting together modules and lectures, recording lectures that I can share. Dr. Doss is preparing a module, one of our fellows, and many of my team members who helped me put this together by providing the content. And my job was to put everything together and bring people together so that we can start this conversation. You can send me an email. You can follow me on Twitter. I don't post too much on Twitter. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I do post updates in LinkedIn by going to this tinyurl.com/dbari. And I'll be happy to talk to you more about these ideas that excite me. So I am ready to start a conversation on what you think about this ideas and project, and how do you think physicians can be trained and engaged in learning. I'm going to try to also look at the chat box now. So one question, you can unmute yourself and speak anytime you want. This is not a webinar, and I'm not just giving a sermon. So feel free to introduce yourself, your ideas, what you're doing, what you like to do, and what you like about teaching or adult learners. I'm going to take this one quickly, which is a point about peer feedback. And there are many challenges to it. There is challenge of quality of feedback. What will be a quality if a peer is giving feedback to the other? Structure of feedback, sensitivities of feedback. You don't want to tell just the negatives to someone and really kill their spirit and make them think that they're the worst person. So there are many such challenges that you have to think about when you are designing or allowing peer feedback. So you also have to train the person giving feedback to the other person. So there are a few aspects to it. One is that I introduced this pretty late. So I let them absorb the culture of the course, see how I am giving feedback to them and other faculty giving feedback to them. So they kind of start getting used to the norms of feedback in the course. I also try to create rubrics or some guidance for them that they can use for feedback. And then I also initially at least try to anonymize the feedback so that they are giving feedback to someone not knowing who that person is, and the person gets feedback from 2 or 3 peers compiled together before we start open up giving full face-to-face or one-on-one feedbacks. I use their scores where they're grading and giving feedback as an average. So I have 3 people grade or give feedback to one person, and I use this pile together or compile together. And then I introduce the concepts of group assignments first so that they get comfortable working with each other, and try to see how each person thinks and writes or put together assignments before they reach a stage of giving feedback to each other, so that there is kind of a gradual easing into it as feedback. Very good. So that's the only question I had in chat. So I'm going to try to invite some of you to introduce yourself, give your thoughts about learning in adults. And I'm sure many of you are also doing good work in terms of educating and teaching your peers. Who wants to be brave enough to go first? Extra points for that person. All
I'll
right,
go,
Heather.
I'll go first. My name is Dr. Kahoot. I'm an assistant professor at a brand new blended doctorate of physical therapy program through the College of St. Mary. I teach fundamental courses, so not clinical skills, but obviously then I have multiple other faculty team members that are teaching the clinical skills courses as physical therapists. My background is in medicine. So I teach pathophysiology 1 and pathophysiology 2, pharmacology. I also help with the differential diagnosis and diagnostic imaging course. I will be a course director for a course that will focus on teaching training DPT students how to utilize health information technology programs to see patients virtually. As that's definitely a new way of physical therapists to be practicing. And I think that's pretty much what I do. I was very interested in listening to your presentation today because I thought it was very applicable, training health professionals, new health professionals that are not face-to-face or in a brick and mortar campus. We don't have 5 time zones, but we do have students across 4 time zones currently. So from East Coast to Pacific Coast. So thank you for sharing what your approach has been. I think we probably have a lot of similarities in what our programs are going through.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. All right. Any thoughts, comments? Anybody wants to introduce themselves or make any suggestions? Ask any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. If you're going to be this scared as a teacher, I'm not sure how scared your students will be. Imagine your learners when they are put on the spot and say, okay, who wants to go? Who wants to go first and give feedback?
Just a comment that our program is currently looking at something that you spoke about, actually, self-directed learning and self-regulated learning, and just evaluating not just how can you be a better instructor or have the learner meet the learning objectives in a online or a blended type of approach, but how to approach that in a culturally responsive way, and intentionally look at how to promote the self-directed learning or self-regulated learning within a health professional program. I think as a lot of health professionals across the board, most students become self-directed learners or self-regulated learners by the time they actually get done with their program, but to what extent that they develop those skills throughout the health professional program, I think is interesting and challenging for the students. So I appreciated the information that you shared about that.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. It's interesting. In the last few days, I've been through other educational conferences. I've been hearing some concerns, and I have seen that too, that a lot of time, uh, especially the medical students or people who are not yet working, um, they have this fear of being left alone on themselves to teach. So a lot of time they actually rebel back and complain that we're not being taught, and we're not supposed to learn ourselves, or we're not getting anything, and some of the teachers worry that they start getting bad reviews, that when you try to flip the teaching and have them take the responsibility, there is some pushback from the learners, and they in the sense of negative reviews or bad reviews or dissatisfaction. So it has to be done in a cautious way, in a way to kind of keep them engaged about the reasons of why this approach is important for them, and so that you don't lose them in the process. So, that's something I struggled with too. I've been able to do it more successfully more recently with my adult learners, but when I teach with medical students in the medical school, with the very short time I have, there is sometimes a fire back of, in the sense of bad reviews and negative reviews, that, oh, the slides were empty, there was not much content, or the handouts were not enough detail, or I didn't get all the articles I should have received about this topic, or something like that. So that's something to watch for. Dr. Bertoni, I see you on the camera. Were you had any comments? You're muted. Okay. I'm not sure I can still hear you, Dr. B. And I think, Steve, I think you shared a link in the chat box. Lessons in Learning looks like a good read. I will go through it.
It's a study that was done in Harvard last year about student perception of active learning. It felt very relevant to what you were talking about just a moment ago, of even though there's lots of research and even data from these direct courses shows that the student learning is improved through these active learning strategies. Students are so accustomed to passive learning that they're uncomfortable in that environment. And like you were saying, it's not uncommon for the initial reaction from students to be negative, even though it ends up leading to these really positive outcomes. So I think the point you were making about the value of reinforcing the reasoning for pursuing these approaches is really important. I'm also going to drop a link in chat now because we're at the end of our formal time for this. We're perfectly fine to stick around and continue Q&A until 2 o'clock. We've got an interest group that's happening in this same room at that time. But I'm going to put a link in chat for evaluation for the session. So those of you who are here in attendance, feel free to use that link to provide some feedback.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing that. I think one of the challenge I see is that as we're going through this transition time, a lot of our peers are teaching the old style, and the old style is like candy. There is a reward immediately and not a long-term benefit. While our teaching is more like exercise, you will see rewards after you do it for enough months or duration. So and then the feedback is asked. There is only immediate feedback currently. So students are supposed to rate their faculty at the end of the class or on the end of the session, not 3 months later or 6 months later or a year later. And I wonder if you have a feedback mechanism where the students come back a year later and now rate their faculty who taught them a year ago, and how the scores will actually change when they finally realize what's useful long-term and what was only useful immediately. Dr. B, you want to try, see if you have
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, good. And I just wanted to mention for Steve, the whole reason for education is so the teacher is no longer going to be eventually part of the student's life. And I can remember very well in high school, college, and medical school, the teachers that I now respect the most, I didn't really understand how valuable it was. So what you're trying to do as a teacher is make yourself now not needed. So if you can, giving feedback, we should give ourselves our own feedback. We should always ask for feedback. Did it come across the way I wanted to? And there's all sorts of things we can do to improve dropping these ahs and other things that we tend to do, but we want to make sure that we get to the student, and they're all different. There may be just wanting to know, the typical thing is this going to be on the test? Because I don't want to know it if it's not on the test. And when you talk to people who are really, really brilliant, they say the problem with education in lots of cases is you're just giving them the answers to questions that may not be important. It's the questions they're going to come up with later on in life that they're going to have to solve, and you got to give them those tools. So we want them, we judge them based on if they answer the questions correctly, but we got to give them questions they're not expecting then, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said there. And I actually, because it's so relevant to this whole conversation, not to co-opt things and plug what I'm working on, but because I think this is an excellent and super important discussion. I've actually developed a resource. It's been a little bit of a passion project over the past couple of years. I developed a set of classroom conversation cards. Just put a link in chat for those. And there some of these larger metacognitive questions that you can open up a dialogue with your students about. And they're not meant to be like slavishly followed by any means, but some different topics to help students think about how they're learning and what that process looks like, that aren't discipline specific, but are really important to fostering that sense of students as lifelong learners. So
Wow.
if those are of interest, have at
That's
them.
wonderful. That's a very comprehensive resource, and that's a lot of work for a hobby.
Well, thanks. Not just a hobby. I mean, it's my gig. I'm an instructional designer down here, and it felt like an important space, and I had an idea that I found interesting, so I ran with it.
Those look really good. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you all end up using them in any capacity, I'd love to hear back from you about what those experiences ended up looking like.
Sounds great. Cool. I think we can take some break before we go to those interest groups discussion.
Sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.
All right, great, thanks.